Well, good morning, everyone. We'll get rolling here with the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Thanks to everybody that's joined us here today. I'll introduce our committee members. Deputy Chair, Mr. Nerling, Ms. Lambert, Mr. Gowdy, Mr. Kiesig, substituting for Mr. Lemeg, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Fayaz, substituting for Delbert Kirsch, Ms. Alina Young. I'd like to introduce our officials from the Provincial Comptroller's Office, Chris Beta, our Provincial Comptroller, Jane Borland, our Assistant Provincial Comptroller. Beta, I thought you have a good choice in tie here today, looking sharp at the table. I'd like to welcome and introduce our Provincial Auditor, Tara Clement, and I'd ask her to introduce just briefly the officials that she has with her here today.
Thank you. So with me to my left is Deputy Provincial Auditor Trevor St. John, and he's the Deputy Provincial Auditor for the Finance Division. And then behind me is Michelle Lindenbach. She's our liaison with this committee, so she will be with us all day, and so I won't reintroduce her for each of the various sessions that we flipped to this morning.
Thank you very much, Auditor. Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move a motion. I appreciate that.
Just hold for a moment. Sure, if you have a motion, you can speak to it briefly, and then you can move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think at the outset, I'd just like to note that I did circulate this motion as a courtesy and out of respect to all my colleagues around this table in advance. And I appreciate that this is a unique situation, and it does bring me no great joy or pleasure to move this motion, but it is important. As I said, I appreciate this is a unique situation and an important issue. Trust in government and the management of public resources is of the utmost concern to the work of public officials and to elected governments. As is noted by the Office of the Provincial Auditor, for the parliamentary system of government to work properly, it must have the public's confidence. To merit this confidence, the government's programs must be effective, open, and accountable to the public. And one important responsibility of the Legislative Assembly is to hold the government of Saskatchewan accountable for its management of public resources. We've endeavored to move this issue forward through the Legislative Assembly and now bring this motion forward to the Public Accounts Committee. So with those brief comments, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the following motion. That the Standing Committee on Public Accounts pursuant to subsection 16(1) of the Provincial Auditor Act requests that the Provincial Auditor perform a special assignment investigation to examine the Ministry of Social Services policies, expenditures, and procedures regarding the management of public funds through the payment of hotel fees for clients and those in the care of the Ministry. I so move.
Anyone. Tweet it again. Okay, the motion's been moved. Ms. Young has moved a motion. And should I repeat the motion, or did everyone hear it? Has read. I would ask, certainly others can speak to the motion now. Any other speakers? Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Young failed to explain section 16 sub 1 in her remarks. It's not enough just for this committee to request a special assignment. Subsection 16(1)(a)(2) states that this committee is responsible for providing the funding needed to undertake the special assignment. CTV News reported on December 1st, 2023, that the provincial auditor is already reviewing these matters as part of the 2024 audits. This audit is being done within the scope of the auditor's regular budget. I want to thank the auditor for her work. I do not think it is responsible to duplicate the auditor's efforts by ordering a special assignment into what is already being reviewed. This will only increase the cost to taxpayers at the expense of this committee's budget. Thank you.
Any other speakers to the motion? I guess at this point then, would members be ready for the question on the motion? Okay. Do members agree with the motion as read? Okay.
No.
Yeah. You sure can. A recorded vote has been called. The question before the committee is that the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, pursuant to Section 16(1) of the Provincial Auditor Act, requests that the provincial auditor perform a special assignment investigation to examine the Ministry of Social Services policies, expenditures, and procedures regarding the management of public funds through the payment of hotel fees for clients and those in the care of the ministry. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Oh, sorry, yeah. Thank you, sir. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. I get to vote as a... All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. I voted as well. And I think can I give a point of clarification to him right now? So just a clarification, we don't have the substitution form yet, so we aren't able to record a vote or participation yet for the one for Mr. Fayaz. But as it stands, those in favor of the motion were 2. Those opposed to the motion were 5. So the motion is defeated. Yeah. There we are. Looks like we're over to you guys. Okay, folks, we'll move along with our first agenda item here this morning, the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority. At this point, I'd like to welcome CEO Sobel Kibbage for joining us, along with Executive Director Hugo Bert for joining us here this morning. What I'll do is I'll turn it over to the auditor's office for a brief presentation, then we'll flip it back your way for a brief response, then we'll open it up for questions. And I'll turn it over to the auditor.
So good morning, Mr. Chair, Deputy Chair, committee members, and officials. Today, Trevor St. John, the Deputy Provincial Auditor for the Finance Division, is going to do a presentation highlighting both chapters that are on the agenda together, given that they do cover the same topic. So one being the original performance audit and the other one being the follow-up audit at the authority with regards to regulating motor vehicle dealers to protect consumers. The first chapter does include 4 new recommendations for the committee's consideration. I do want to thank the CEO of the authority as well as his staff for the cooperation that was extended to us during the course of our work. With that, I'll turn it over to Trevor.
Thank you. The Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority is responsible to regulate Saskatchewan's marketplace, including motor vehicle dealers. Without effective processes to regulate vehicle dealers, the authority may not effectively protect Saskatchewan consumers, public interests, and businesses. There were 841 motor vehicle dealers in Saskatchewan at March 31st, 2022. Chapter 7 in our 2020 report, Volume 1, starting on page 65, reports the results of our audit of the effectiveness of the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority's processes for regulating motor vehicle dealers to protect consumers. We concluded for the 12-month period ended December 6, 2019, the Financial Consumer Affairs Authority had effective processes for regulating motor vehicle dealers to protect consumers, except as noted in our 4 recommendations. Chapter 12 of our 2022 report, Volume 1, starting on page 159, reports the results of the authority's actions to implement these recommendations by February 2022. We found it implemented 2 recommendations, partially implemented 1, and made no progress on the last recommendation. My presentation will summarize the new recommendations and then provide the status at February 2022. The first original recommendation is on page 76. We recommended the Financial Consumer Affairs Authority select motor vehicle dealers for inspection based on a formal analysis of key risks for noncompliance. In 2019, the authority had a draft compliance policy and procedure manual and would require investigators to assess each dealer's risk, which would inform the frequency and content of inspections. However, the manual was not in use and did not document key parts of the inspection planning process, including how to assess dealers' risks level when determining how many and which dealers to inspect in any given year. In addition, the authority did not document its rationale for selecting the licensed vehicle dealers it inspected. Authority management advised this. It informally considered factors such as the dealer's history, previous enforcement, and location, but did not consider other risk factors such as size of the dealership or a number of individuals impacted by past incidents. Without clearly defined risk factors to select motor vehicle licensed dealers, there is an increased risk of an inconsistent selection process and not focusing inspection resources on dealers of a higher risk. By February 2022, on page 160 of our follow-up chapter, we found the authority had developed a well-defined risk framework it plans to use to select motor vehicle dealers for inspection, but had not yet fully used this framework to select motor vehicle dealers to inspect. We found the framework set out key steps and provided a list of risk factors to consider. The authority planned to use the framework once it obtained some additional information from motor vehicle dealers and automated key aspects of the inspection rating process. The second original recommendation on page 79 of our 2020 report is that we recommended the Financial Consumer Affairs Authority update and implement a policy and procedures manual for inspections of motor vehicle dealers. In 2019, we found the authority gave inspectors some guidance such as objectivity requirements and steps to initiate inspections. The guidance did not include standard timeframes to communicate inspection results, criteria for determining enforcement actions, or requirement to leave evidence of inspection file reviews. Not having finalized and approved guidance can impede the authority's ability to effectively and efficiently train and support staff in the event of planned or unplanned turnover. On page 162 of our follow-up chapter, we concluded the authority implemented this recommendation. We found the authority implemented a new policy and procedures manual that included appropriate and sufficient guidance to support the authority's compliance and enforcement efforts. The third original recommendation on page 80 of our 2020 report, we recommended the authority formally monitor the completion of motor vehicle dealer inspections compared to inspection plans. In 2019, the authority maintained a spreadsheet of inspections completed each year, but did not document its comparison to planned inspections. And if not completed, why not? We found for 2018-19, the authority completed 32 of 42 planned inspections, and for the 8-month period ending November 2019, it completed 12 of 27 planned inspections. Not formally monitoring the completion of its annual inspection plan increases the risk of the authority not using inspections as an effective, proactive enforcement activity. This could lead to a loss of confidence in the ability to protect consumer rights. On page 163 of our follow-up chapter, we concluded the authority implemented this recommendation. We found the authority's inspectors tracked inspections completed, compared to planned, and properly recorded an explanation when they did not complete a planned inspection. The last and fourth recommendation is on page 81 of our 2020 report. We recommended the Financial Consumer Affairs Authority formally analyze the results of its enforcement activities for motor vehicle dealers to support a risk-informed enforcement approach. In 2019, we found the authority sufficiently reported to senior management and the board on licensing, complaints, education, and enforcement actions taken, but did not analyze and report information about the results of its enforcement activities. The authority did not analyze the non-compliance identified to help it assess whether inspections completed sufficiently promoted compliance and assess risks of non-compliance. Without formal analysis of motor vehicle dealer enforcement activity results, such as non-compliance trends, the authority does not know if resources it is expending on enforcement and compliance activities makes the expected difference and whether it is focusing its efforts in the right areas. A well-defined risk-informed approach helps protect motor vehicle purchasers and supports consumer confidence. On page 163 of our follow-up chapter, we found the authority did not formally document its analysis of non-compliance trends and other findings from inspections and complaint investigations. The authority was working on a process to document its analysis and expected to start reporting to senior management in 2022-23. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation, the work, and the follow-up. Thanks as well to FCAA for their work on these fronts. I want to table at this point PAC 11229, Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority Status Update, dated December 14th, 2023. And I'll turn it over to them to provide brief response, then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you for inviting us to speak to these important reports. The FCAA agreed with and accepted all of the provincial auditor's recommendations. As noted in the follow-up report in Chapter 12, 2022, Report Volume 1, the FCAA fully implemented the second and third recommendations. Regarding the first recommendation that we select vehicle dealers for inspection based on a formal analysis of key risks for noncompliance, we consider this recommendation partially implemented. As noted in the provincial auditor's follow-up report in 2022, we have designed and developed a well-defined risk framework. The framework utilizes a robust risk assessment matrix that includes a listing of all key risks and a weighting of those risks to emphasize more severe risks. The follow-up report in 2022 also noted there were two remaining steps planned by the FCAA to fully implement this recommendation. The first was to obtain the additional information we need to utilize in the new enhanced risk assessment from the licensed vehicle dealers because we weren't collecting all of the information at that time. And the second was to automate key aspects of the new risk assessment framework in our registration and licensing system, or RLS. Since the follow-up report in 2022, we've worked with our RLS vendor to develop our risk identification solution. The solution will expand the information collected from vehicle dealers so that we have all the information we need to do the enhanced risk assessment, and it will also automate most of the risk assessment process. As of the current date, the risk identification solution has been fully developed in RLS and testing is substantially complete. The next step will be to go live and launch the solution, which we expect to do at the end of the fiscal year. Our vendor was not able to deliver the solution before that time because they are currently launching an upgraded platform for all of their clients, including the FCAA's RLS system. While the risk identification solution will be live and operational at the beginning of the 24-25 fiscal year, we will not be able to use it in the way intended to determine our inspection plan for vehicle dealers for 24-25 because we won't have all the data yet. Vehicle dealer licensees' annual filing requirements fall due on the anniversary of their initial licensing date, so we don't get all of their annual filings at one time in a year. They're spread throughout the year. So we expect to have all of the data towards the end of the 24-25 fiscal year, so the 25-26 fiscal year will be the first year we actually use the full solution to determine our inspection plan. Regarding the fourth and last recommendation that the FCAA formally analyze the results of its enforcement activities for motor vehicle dealers to support a risk-informed enforcement approach, we now consider this recommendation partially implemented. As noted in the follow-up report in 2022, the FCAA was working on a process to document and report our analysis of enforcement and compliance trends. Through this work, we identify a need to utilize our digital systems to most effectively and efficiently identify the non-compliance trends. The risk identification solution in RLS will play a significant role in this process. The enforcement and compliance results that will be fed into the risk identification solution is the same information we will use to identify the enforcement and compliance trends. We plan to develop a separate report to be run in RLS that will extract and summarize those trends for efficient analysis and discussion. The RLS reporting function is expected to be live and operational at the same time the risk identification solution is live, so the end of this fiscal year. But as with the risk identification solution, we will not have all the data to do the full analysis as intended. But once we get all the filings for the 24-25 fiscal year, we'll have all the data and we'll be able to do the full reporting and full analysis and reporting of enforcement and compliance trends to feed into the 25-26 inspection plan. In closing, I'd like to thank the provincial auditor and her officials for their professional and diligent work and the recommendations they made that will improve the FCAA's regulation of vehicle dealers in the province. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, CEO Bo Kibbage, for your presentation and the work of all within the organization on these fronts. Thanks for detailing your actions in this status update to us. That's really helpful to clarify where we need to focus with questions. I'll look to committee members who might have questions at this point. Ms. Young?
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here and for the work undertaken as well by your staff back at the office and working with the provincial auditor and implementing these recommendations. I understand, based on your status update and the comments that you've made here, that the new automated risk identification solution set to launch prior to March 2024, but not all of the data points using the solution will be accessible until 25-26 fiscal. Just to make sure I understand, you indicated that the vendor is upgrading their platform. And am I right in my understanding that it's not necessarily specific data points that aren't available, but rather it's due to the staggered nature of registration for vehicle dealers that there's that lag?
Well, it's because we don't have all of the data points and we won't get all of them because of the staggered filing dates until towards the end of 24-25.
Great, thank you. So having heard that, I believe it's noted in the report that some trend analysis did begin in 22-23. Can you provide some general statistics on that? You know, how many dealers were found in non-compliance over the past 3 years?
How many dealers found not in compliance? I mean, certainly with respect to the risk matrix, and so we're using the information that we have available to us right now, you know, the basic requirements they have to provide as part of their filing. So whether or not they're a consignment dealer or do they lease vehicles, that sort of thing. And so we use that information to assist us at identifying which vehicle dealers to inspect and why, along with some of the complaints information we have available to us. To Roger's point, we don't have all the information available to us to do the fulsome review. You know, a question that we have in our new enhanced one is whether or not they sell rebuilds, the salesperson turnover, those sorts of things. And so using the information we have available to us now was helpful in terms of who to identify and who to inspect and where to inspect. In terms of compliance trends, though, we haven't seen to this date, you know, an increased number of complaints or issues with those inspections based on the information we have currently available to us.
Thank you. And do you track or maintain records on how many vehicle dealers are found to be non-compliant year over year?
Well, we track the number of disputes that we receive. And so in general, we receive holistically up to 500 disputes in a year that are complaints that are filed. Some of them are founded and some of them aren't founded, of course. In regards to the number of vehicle dealer disputes, it's around 55% of the total disputes that we have. Yeah, and in terms of the inspection results, certainly we see trends. We know how many vehicle dealers aren't in compliance with respect to typically we do 40 inspections a year. And as a result of those inspections, there are dealers that aren't compliant. I would say between 40 and 50% of them are not compliant. And it's trends that we're working on, identifying and educating them. And it's the similar trends that we've seen in previous years.
So of those 40 inspections, I'm right in hearing like 18 to 20 of them are found to be non-compliant every year, and that's a trend that has held steady over the past 3 years?
It's held steady, but generally speaking, a portion of the vehicle dealers that we inspect are non-compliant, yes.
Right, thanks. I'm just trying to get a handle on what a portion means in terms of.
To add a little bit of color to that too, the non-compliance that we find could be small things, and it typically would be, because if it was more serious, we would escalate and take enforcement action. So it's not necessarily that the 18 to 20 are rampantly non-compliant, yeah.
I understand that, thanks. I guess maybe last try at that question. So you do have that information available in terms of each year, how many vehicle dealers are found to be non-compliant?
Undertaken? Yes, yes.
And sorry, how many is that for the past 3 years?
I'd have to go back, and I don't have that data available in front of me.
Okay, great, thanks. If that could be made available to the committee at some point, that'd be appreciated. Thanks.
Just to jump in here then, thanks for the undertaking. That's information that you'll be able to provide back to the committee in due course. And just, you can do so through the, thank you for that undertaking. You just do so through the clerk, and then that's circulated to the committee. Thank you very much.
So of that portion every year, having heard that you said, obviously they're not egregious violations that are found, but of those, do you have information in terms of how many are high risk each year?
I can state that a low number of them would be high risk, because we would go through our progressive enforcement and discipline model if there was ones that were egregious. So it could be something as simple as signage, that's not in line with the signage that we have on file, or a disclosure issue that wasn't provided to a consumer, which is more of a concern, of course, and so we take steps to rectify that through our progressive enforcement model.
Thank you. And do you track year over year the number that are found to be high risk? Okay, great. If that information for the last 3 years could also be provided, that'd be appreciated. Thanks. And then how many licenses have been suspended for each of the last 3 years?
I'd have to provide that information to you as well.
Thank you. So I guess maybe taking a step back, for the committee's understanding, what are the highest risk areas of noncompliance?
Areas that we've seen are the highest risk areas that are contemplated in our new framework.
Ooh, why not both?
Sure. So, we see high risk areas if a vehicle dealer is selling vehicles on consignment, right? It's a huge issue. So if somebody's selling their vehicle on consignment and there's a delay in payment back to that consumer, right? We see higher risk areas if they're selling rebuilds. So vehicles that were previously totally written off, and they have to go through two different inspections through SGI, a light vehicle safety inspection and then a body integrity inspection. So those are high risk areas, right? Vehicles that have been substantive previous collisions. High risk areas were disclosure issues, right? Or negative equity, when people are purchasing vehicles on a 9-year loan and interest rates the way they are, right? And not disclosing that there's negative equity within those transactions, right? So those are issues that were being addressed through our matrix. And certainly lien payouts is a high risk area that we spend a lot of time on right now. And so when a person is refinancing their vehicle or financing a new vehicle, it's a payout of the original lien. It's a high risk area that certainly causes some concerns for our office if there's a delay in that payment being made. Multiple past violations, sure, certainly. Yeah.
So thank you for that. For the committee, can you explain what the process is currently and then I suppose if it isn't expected to change, for when a motor vehicle dealer is found to be in non-compliance. You spoke about this a bit in terms of kind of like a graduated level of intervention or discipline. Can you explain to the committee what that looks like, practically speaking?
So it would be fairly consistent with regulation in the other areas that we regulate as well. Typically, when someone's in non-compliance, depending on the severity of it, if a consumer suffered harm, the first step is always trying to get voluntary compliance through letting them know you're not in compliance. You're expected to do these things. And then if they don't come into compliance or not in the time frame that we'd ask them to, then we could. We have a number of enforcement tools. We can suspend a license. We can impose terms and conditions. We can cancel a license. The more severe sanctions we have are reserved for the more severe infractions. Now, with that said, the first, if it was a severe contravention that showed intentional dishonesty and harm to consumers, something of that nature, we might go to a stronger intervention. We do have the ability to suspend a license immediately and then provide a hearing within 15 days. And that's reserved for if we feel they pose just an undue risk that we have to prevent them from harming consumers even before we actually give them a hearing. But that's reserved for very unusual situations. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Like Roger said, the egregiousness of the situation really dictates where you proceed. I mean, obviously we want to work with educating licensees and informing them and giving them an opportunity to address that consumer harm, and then going through our progressive tools, whether it's a written warning or potentially a suspension or notice of suspension with an opportunity to be heard. But we want to work with our licensees as much as we can to help with that voluntary compliance.
Thank you, and perhaps, hopefully, last question for me. Consumer protection obviously being incredibly important, and the work that you do, really supporting that for the viewing public at home. I think the average consumer would appreciate that there's been a significant shift in the vehicle market since, I suppose, the start of the pandemic back in 2020, the outset of the auditor's initial report. And I'm wondering what, if any, impacts this has had on the work that you do day to day in this area, or that you've undertaken in implementing these recommendations.
There hasn't been an increase in number or volume of complaints that we've had.
We're not adjusting our work in any way. For us, we're not seeing, there's a trend there on sort of the consumer's buying experience, but it's not necessarily translating into a material change in the regulatory risk that we have to change how we approach things.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we see that trend happening, then of course we would adjust.
Thank you very much. No further questions from me, Mr. Chair.
Good questions, good responses. I think there was 3 different questions that there was undertaken to provide information back. So if you can just have that provided back through the clerk here. Is a month's time from this meeting reasonable? Thank you very much. We'll kick it over, see if there's other questions at this point. No? Keesig, you bought a used truck or anything lately that you got a question about, or?
I'm perfectly fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you again for the work in these areas. There's 4 new recommendations that we need to vote on here. The first and number 4, I believe we've heard progress towards compliance or implementation on that front. So I would welcome a motion to concur and note progress. Is there someone that would care to move that? Ms. Lambert?
No progress.
Okay, all agreed? Okay, that's carried for recommendations 1 and 4. For 2 and 3, can we concur and note compliance? Is there a motion to that effect? Mr. Gowdy moves. All agreed? All right, that's carried. Any final words on your behalf? And I just want to say thank you so very much again for your time here today, all those involved in this work as well.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, well, thank you, CEO Sobel-Kibbage and Mr. Hugobert. Thank you for your time this morning. We will now move along and turn our attention shortly. They look like they're not on deck here right now, so a very brief recess, and up next is 3S Health. Or do you want to wait for a minute? Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and we'll turn our attention to the auditor's chapters focused on 3S Health. I'd like to welcome all the officials and all the leadership that's here for Health and 3S Health. I'll turn it over briefly to Deputy Minister Smith to introduce the officials that are here with her today. Maybe hold off on providing other comments on the chapters at this moment, because we'll kick it over to the auditor and then bring it back to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I just want to again thank, on behalf of the Ministry of Health, want to thank the auditor for the opportunity to discuss the chapter that we have in front of us. I do have with me today a few people from the ministry and from 3S Health with me to answer some questions and any follow-up on the reports. From the ministry, we've got Greg Gettle, Assistant Deputy Minister, just sitting behind me, Norm O'Neill to my left, Assistant Deputy Minister, Diana Fink, who is our Director of Operations and Internal Audit, and Victoria Zhang, our Manager of Internal Audit. And also with me today, I have from 3S Health, I have Mark Anderson, the Chief Executive Officer for the organization, Alana Shearer-Kleefield, the Vice President of Employee Benefits, and Jada Lee Wilson, Director of Claim Services. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to everyone for their attendance and their work on the items we'll discuss here this morning. I'll turn it over to the auditor for her presentation, and then we'll bring it back your way.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, Deputy Chair, committee members, and officials. With me today is Mr. Jason Wandy. He's the Deputy Provincial Auditor for the Health Division. Behind him is also Mrs. Kim Lowe. She's the Senior Principal who was responsible for leading the audit that we're going to discuss today. This morning, Jason is going to present our chapter about 3S Health's processes to manage disability claims, which does include 4 new recommendations for the committee's consideration. I do want to thank the CEO of 3S Health and all of his staff for the cooperation that was extended to us during the course of our work. With that, I'll flip it over to Jason to give an overview on the chapter.
Thanks, Tara. Chapter 3 of our 2022 report, Volume 1, reports the results from our audit of Health Shared Services Saskatchewan's, or 3S Health's, processes to manage disability claims for certain healthcare employees for the 12-month period ending October 31st of 2021. This chapter includes 4 new recommendations. 3S Health is responsible for administering 4 disability income plans for certain healthcare employees in Saskatchewan, such as those working in hospitals or long-term care homes. At October 2021, there were over 40,000 healthcare employees from various healthcare organizations among the 4 disability income plans. 3S Health staff assess and adjudicate disability claims and may obtain advice from medical advisors to help guide adjudication decisions, or from physicians to help interpret medical information and the appropriateness of treatment. We concluded 3S Health had, other than the areas identified in our 4 recommendations, effective processes to manage disability claims for certain healthcare employees for the 12-month period ended October 31st of 2021. In our first recommendation on page 30, we recommend Health Shared Services Saskatchewan send completed disability benefit claim applications to adjudicators on time. A claim application for disability benefits is complete when 3S Health receives both employee and employer applications and an attending physician statement. Upon receiving a completed application, 3S Health requires a benefit services officer to set up a member profile in the claims management IT system and contact the member the same day, advising their application is complete. The officer then submits the application to an adjudicator to assess members' eligibility and coverage. We tested 30 applications and found the benefit service officers called and sent emails to members advising their application was complete. However, officers did not always make timely application submissions to the adjudicator, causing delays in decision-making. For 12 applications tested, we found the delays in submitting completed applications to adjudicators ranged from 4 to 11 business days, resulting in some members not receiving a claim decision until up to 30 days later. Delays in processing incoming applications cause further delays in adjudicating, which places more stress on members waiting for decisions on their disability claims and subsequent payment of benefits. In our second recommendation on page 37, we recommend Health Shared Services Saskatchewan follow its established timelines to complete appeal reviews on disability claims and document reasons for significant delays. 3S Health expects staff to review and make a decision on all appeals within 30 business days of their receipt. We analyzed 3S Health's appeals data and found it does not make timely appeal decisions. During 2020 and 2021, our analysis found 3S Health made over 80% of its appeal decisions later than the expected 30 days. Our testing of 6 appeals found similar results. Without timely appeal review and decisions, members may not be receiving benefits on time, which may place undue stress on plan members. Without knowing why appeal decisions take longer than expected, management cannot address root causes of delays. In our third recommendation on page 38, we recommend Health Shared Services Saskatchewan centrally track and analyze complaints from plan members regarding disability benefit claims. When a member has a complaint or inquiry, the member can contact 3S Health via phone or email. 3S Health expects adjudicators to escalate complaints or inquiries to management, such as to a claims specialist, who will contact the member to resolve the issue. We tested 3 complaints and found that all 3 were appropriately resolved within 3 to 8 business days. However, we found 3S Health does not centrally track the number or specific nature of complaints related to plan member disability benefit claims and subsequent resolution. Without centrally tracking complaints, 3S Health does not know the number and nature of complaints it receives. As such, it is unable to analyze complaint information to improve its disability claims management processes. In our fourth recommendation on page 42, we recommend Health Shared Services Saskatchewan enhance its written reports to senior management and the Board of Trustees about its disability claims management processes. We found that 3S Health reports most of its key performance information to senior management and the Board of Trustees, such as information about its 2 key performance measures related to the delivery and quality of disability claims or the results of member surveys. However, we found neither senior management nor the board receive information on 3S Health's performance target for appeals, that is, making appeal decisions within 30 business days of receiving an appeal. Additionally, 3S Health could further improve its reports to senior management and the board by including written analysis of the results. Having more information and analysis on its disability claims process would allow senior management and the board to know whether the claims management process is working as intended and make adjustments as needed. I'll now pause for the committee's consideration.
Okay, thanks for the focus of the chapter and the recommendations. Thanks as well for the status update provided and the work that's gone in on these fronts. I'll table at this point PAC 11329 3S Health status update dated December 14th, 2023. Thanks again for providing that to us. I'll turn it over to Deputy Minister Smith for a brief response to the recommendations, then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'll just maybe add that I just have some brief comments really at the front end because there were just the 4 recommendations, just sort of summing that up. And then we'll go into questions. And again, I want to just thank the provincial auditor, Tara and her team, Jason and Kim for your support on this audit. We do really appreciate the services and the oversight that you help to provide to not only the Ministry of Health, but to our partner agencies such as 3 Health Saskatchewan, who is with us here today. So just to summarize, the Ministry of Health and 3S Health, we have made good progress on the 4 managing disability claims recommendations, with 2 fully implemented and 2 partially implemented. Work is underway to continue to fully implement the outstanding recommendations, and I am confident that ongoing work will continue as a result of today's review and discussions. We do appreciate the analysis and detailed audits provided by the provincial auditor. You really do provide a very thorough analysis through the processes that help generate some really important recommendations to ourselves and to our other service sector partners as well. So we appreciate that, again, the ongoing dialogue that we have and some of the input that you give to us on the services that ultimately, regardless of whether we're talking about 3S Health or our other partner agencies, which is really critical to delivering services to the citizens of our province and to the patients who are receiving those services. So I'll just maybe conclude just some comments that we I know we'll get into maybe some questions on the recommendations in front of us, but we will continue to work with the provincial auditor on a series of recommendations and just really appreciate the input. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Deputy Minister Smith. I'll look to committee members now for questions. Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Minister, for being here today, and my thanks as well to all of your officials, as well as to the Auditor's Office and everyone who undertook to implement these recommendations. I know a great deal of work goes on that is unseen by this committee on both sides, and I appreciate it. In the status update, it notes the performance of 3S Health was surpassing its target of over 90% within 8 days. And then starting from October 2023, this dropped 12% below the standard currently at, I believe, 78%. Can you expand on this rapid decline in the performance on this measure?
Thank you. I'm going to introduce again Mark Anderson, who's the CEO of 3S Health, and he can provide a little bit more detail on the question that you've asked. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. So thanks very much. I think, when you set a service standard in any part of your business, its goal is to ensure we know what we're targeting at, what we're driving towards, and every single day we aim to achieve it. And as you can appreciate, a variety of things can impact your ability to deliver on that on a day-to-day basis, and it's sort of our North Star we course correct to. So in the last number of months, we have seen our volumes increase in the number of claims coming in, and that is, of course, one of the key drivers that would take you in a slightly different direction and off of your standard. Although I am very pleased that we were able to be in standard for the majority of the year, and we've done a lot of work to get to that point. The other component is, of course, staffing levels. And since the audit, we have increased our staffing levels significantly to ensure that we can maintain that standard. We have, of course, we do suffer from seasonal illness, some turnover at times, and that, of course, has an impact as well. So I would say those are the two key drivers that have, got us currently off track, and we continue every single day to work back to that standard.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. It's, you noted in your comments that staffing levels are a concern, and it is reflected in the status update that 3S Health is experiencing significant staff movement. I believe it notes departures and internal transfers. Can you speak about, can you clarify why there's such high staff turnover at this time? Turnover and movement.
Just check it. Yeah. So, the turnover, I think, in our organization is not necessarily out of the norm. We are seeing that, in lots of parts of, I think, our economy generally, where people are moving to other positions. And, we have, as I just chatted here with some of our staff, some of that turnover has actually been internal promotions where we've had other opportunities available within the organization. And so we are actively recruiting to fill those roles.
Thank you. So the status update notes significant staff movement. Am I understanding that that's not the case? This is business as usual?
I think, in my conversations with staff back here, I think significant is a relative term. So for us, it's significant relative to the last number of months where we've been in standard. But I'll just check on our total adjudication team, because I think significant, when you think about the size of the team, even a couple of movements can be significant for us.
That was going to be one of my future questions, how many adjudicators you currently have and what your staffing target is for that role specifically.
Sure. So currently, we have 13 budgeted adjudication positions, and we have 12. So we have one vacancy in that position as of right now. And on the benefit services side, which is where that claim is set up in the first place, we currently have 3 vacancies.
And 3 vacancies out of a targeted staff team of what size?
On the BSO side, I'll just double check again. 14? 14 total.
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you said it's really been the last couple months that there's been significant staff movement, some departures, some internal movement as well. Looking at the full staff component relevant to the auditor's chapter, so I'm not sure if it's just the adjudicators in your consideration or if it's those 2 parts. How many employees have left out of what size of a staffing component?
Compared to the period, like today, compared to the period that the audit happened? Is that what your question is?
Oh, I'm curious, the status update talks about, how, and you've said, I believe in your comments, that in recent months, so I'm not sure if that starts in like August or if that starts in September where you see the decline in the service standard, but that there's in recent months been significant staff movement. So I guess my question would be like, what time period are we looking at? And then what has the actual movement of staff been during that time period?
Yeah, so where we've come out of standard is the October-November time period. So I believe we're in standard for all of the months of 2023 up until the October period. So that's when we've come out of standard. And I'd have to get back to you exactly about the turnover during the specific time period, and maybe my officials can drum that up.
Sure,
Thank you.
That would be appreciated. Thank you. What's the current adjudicator caseload?
So our current caseload is 111 files per adjudicator.
And I assume that that's like an average. Okay. What's the highest caseload that any one adjudicator would be carrying? Recognizing that there's work being done to levelize that across employees.
130.
Thank you. In the status update and in your comments today, it's been indicated that there has been a significant increase in the volume of claims. And it's noted that in, I believe, October, it was a 4-year high of disability applications of 270, which was then again surpassed in November with, I believe, 271 applications. Historically, what has the high watermark been for disability applications? This is tough to find immediately, or if you do require more time, I think we would be happy as a committee to receive this at a later date as well.
I believe we have this information handy. It just comes. Okay, so our high over the last 5 years anyways, with the data I have, was the month of June of 2021, where we had just over 300 applications.
Thank you for that. If you have that information available in terms of the trends or like the month over month claims levels for the past 5 years, I think I heard you say, I'd really appreciate having that information provided to the committee.
Maybe on that, so we could receive that right now. If you have that, you could read it into the record. The other option, of course, would be that maybe within a month's time, you could supply that information back to this committee through the clerk. Whatever your preference. If you've got it there, that's great.
I think we'll submit it afterwards. We'll just take a look at the information we have, make sure that it all lines up with the questions that you're sending, and we'll put that forward.
That probably makes sense. I think we're talking
Yeah.
60 months then in the end anyway, so that's probably the best course of action. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So picking up on that, on your last comment, is it correct to assume that this so far appears to be a bit of a trend? The increase in, I mean, we only have the 2 months here. I recognize that I think there's been reporting going to the board since 2022, if I'm remembering accurately. But I guess to focus, is this a trend that we're seeing in terms of the ongoing increase in disability numbers, or is it really only October, November that have been particularly significant?
I think, you see normal variation throughout the year. So it's tough to say whether a couple of months represents a trend, and that's what makes it difficult sometimes to ensure staffing levels are exactly adequate, because you don't know how many claims are going to come in that particular month. But certainly it may end up there, but I think 2 months is probably too early to call it a trend.
So you've noted perhaps a seasonal nature to an ebb and flow of claims trends. Can you expand on what you'd attribute to even the last 2 months a higher number of disability claims?
I don't know that we can attribute it to anything in particular yet. That would be probably me, guessing. But certainly we do see some seasonal variation there. We took a look, at what were the types of things that people were submitting claims for. It has not changed significantly in the last, several years. It's I don't have an answer to that at the moment.
Understanding that you do have data available over the past number of years, can you speak to who these people are putting in claims? I understand the groups that participate in this disability program, but is there anything you'd like to bring to the committee's attention? Are these folks primarily, long-term care workers? Are they EMS? Are they healthcare workers? Are they spread across these professions?
Spread across. Our plans cover, as noted by the auditor, certain healthcare workers, but I think I might say the majority of healthcare workers are covered by these plans. So not physicians, but the vast majority of other healthcare workers would be covered by these plans.
Okay, and I'm right in understanding then that this is kind of levelized then across professions within the field. You're not seeing, for example, a spike in EMS claims in particular, or any particular employee group or categorization.
Not that I could point to, no.
I suppose along a similar vein, understanding that this is a sector that was really impacted on the workload side by the pandemic. We hear a lot about ongoing levels of burnout. Hearing that this is kind of levelized across the professions represented in your field, do you track or maintain a breakdown of the nature of the claims?
At a high level, we do. So our largest type of claim is musculoskeletal injury or problem. So that would be, the biggest one that we have. And then the other categories, I'll just verify that I have the right information. So I have, we have really 4 categories that we're able to report on. The first is, as I mentioned, musculoskeletal injuries, so 36%. Then mental or nervous disorders at 16%, cancer oncology at 9%, and then all other 39%.
Thank you. And do you also track those numbers month to month or year over year?
Year over year for sure. Twice a year.
Okay. And would you have that information available for the same time period, that 5-year period you spoke of earlier?
We do track it. We'll just have to confirm the specifics though for you.
Great. Yeah. If hearing that that is available, if that could be provided to the committee as well, it would be appreciated. So looking at the 4 categories that you listed, which I believe were musculoskeletal, nervous disorders, kind of perhaps mental health, more colloquially speaking, for that second category, if that's a fair.
Be in that category for sure, yeah.
Oncology, and then other for that remaining 39%. Is there an increased incidence of mental health claims in that second category?
We have not seen that. We checked the last 2 years anyway, and we had not seen that change, no.
In the musculoskeletal category, I think in the public consciousness, there's an awareness of, concerns that this is really physical work that a lot of healthcare workers undertake, that can, like many professions, take a toll on people's bodies, and then as a consequence lead to greater increase in claims, if it is potentially work that could be prone to injury or security concerns. In that first category, do you track a breakdown of reasons that members would be physically injured?
We do not, and remembering that this particular program would be secondary insurance to WCB. So if somebody was injured in the workplace, that would be a workers' compensation board claim.
For sure, yeah. It's at first, you want people to go to all other insurance programs, right? WCB or SGI if it's motor vehicle, and then to this program.
Correct.
Yeah. So there's no breakdown of reasons that members could be physically injured. So if I was curious as to whether or not there was a trend, if this was increasing or decreasing, that's not information that you would have for the committee.
I don't believe so, no.
Recognizing that this is almost then a tertiary plan, as you've noted, is there work that 3S Health undertakes to address root causes of injuries or to mitigate the number of claims that comes into this plan?
So just confirm some of our protocols around communication. So we do communicate statistics information to employers, the employers that participate in these plans. And then it's, up to the employers to, do with that as they see fit.
Thank you. So expanding on that perhaps a bit, as the administrator of these plans, there's no, you simply provide the information to the employers who then, by your understanding, are responsible for undertaking any kind of risk mitigations or actions to decrease the incident of workplace injury or disability claims. I shouldn't say workplace injury, disability claims.
Yeah, and I think that's the nuance, though, is, those workplace injuries, again, are covered by Workers' Compensation Board, and I do understand those conversations do occur with employers and WCB. These are, areas where you would become ill or injured outside of the workplace that we're covering. And so we certainly provide information to the employers about what's happening with these plans. And then we take a more active role on the, if they are injured, we basically have a program which we've called Path to Health, which is really around, helping these folks who come into our plans return to health and get back into a place where they're feeling healthy enough to work again.
So just to make sure the committee's crystal clear on that, in terms of the responsibility then for ultimately, I mean, with any insurance plan, with any program, obviously you want to decrease the number of claims that go into that program. There are always going to be some, but you want to be proactive in terms of managing your risks, and then the exposure of organization of members in the plan. With whom does that responsibility lie? Am I right in hearing there's none with 3S Health? There's none with the Board of Trustees?
I think that would be a fair assessment related to this particular plan, yes.
Great. So then kind of circling back to my earlier question around attention to or addressing, root causes of injuries, whether physical or mental. And I believe you said the root causes isn't necessarily tracked within 3S Health. Do the employers, is there like a central repository for that information? Do the employer groups track that? Please correct me if I'm mistaken in my understanding.
So just want to reiterate sort of what our role is and what the plan's role are here. So our role is to, receive the claim to then, so a claim will come in. We then assess and adjudicate whether the claim is covered through the insurance that's provided. That's typically done through medical information, that's provided. And then if they are eligible, then we will pay the claim, and we will work with that claimant on their, to support them throughout the claim in every way that we can to help them in that process. We are not in, so we pick up at the point that they've been injured or that they've had an illness, and not the root cause kind of front end of that.
And again, that's with the employers then?
I think the employer, certainly, as I mentioned, as it relates to the WCB claims, but because these are often outside of the workplace, they can be more, societal types of issues that occur that cause these types of issues in the first place.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I thought some of that information would be centrally tracked somewhere for for a plan of this nature, but I am hearing that it's not at 3S Health, and that's not part of your responsibility. So I can move on. In regards to the implemented central tracking and the analysis of complaints from plan members as it relates to disability benefit claims, see in the report that documentation and central tracking has been implemented. Similar vein of questioning, can you speak to any trends that you're seeing in these claims? Are complaints up, down, steady?
So just as pointed out by the auditor, we did not have a central complaint reporting system previously, so I can't speak to trends, unfortunately. But we do now have it in place, so we will be able to on a go-forward basis. But I can indicate that, you know, we had 23 complaints come in 2022, and 16 of them were related to disability benefits.
Can you remind me when that reporting began? Was it July 2023? And there's no, do you have information available then, I guess, for the past 15 months in terms of the nature of those, or the prevalence of those complaints?
I have some. I just get clarity on the time period I have here. Okay, wasn't the 23 were not from 2022, they were from the start. So it's been since that July 2022 and up until current. We've had 23 complaints, 16 related to disability.
Okay, so 23 complaints, and she tries to do math on her feet, like 17 odd months, I guess.
Ish, yeah.
Ish.
Yep.
Are you able, and you said they were, of the 23, forgive me, 17 were related?
16.
16 were related to disability benefits.
Correct.
Okay. With the new reporting, can you speak to how your claim management process has improved?
So as the complaints are identified and come in, the leadership team within benefits, that's the folks behind me here, they take a look at them and they look to identify, you know, specifically are there areas that they need to respond to, and or are there systemic things that they would need to resolve, and you know that we might have a break in our process or something. So we're very active in the continuous improvement space in our organization, and so as we get feedback and information, we look to identify areas of improvement.
Thanks. And have any systemic concerns or breaks in process been identified?
Oh. For the most part, what we've seen are pretty, single incident related so far in the tracker, but that doesn't mean, in the future we wouldn't see some that we would look to make those improvements.
Having heard for the most part, are there other parts beyond the most part that you can comment on, or is that just a turn of phrase?
What phrase? I'm sorry?
You said for the most part, they've kind of been one-offs, and I was just curious if there was.
Well, when I look at the complaints that we've gotten, it's, there's certainly an area there around late payment that we may have something going on more specifically, but I can't speak to it becoming, a systemic issue with those types of things. They do happen from time to time. There's a lot of claims coming through, a lot of payments coming through, and so occasionally things do get missed, and we try to, pin down our processes very clearly so that we have standard work for our employees and are making sure they're checking those boxes each and every step along the way. And occasionally those steps get missed. Occasionally you need to add a process step, and you say, well, we need to add this component in, and so I don't think we've updated anything on the late payment in that category, to my knowledge.
That was going to be one of my further questions in recommendation 4. It's clear that reporting to the board has become regular and enhanced. And I was going to ask if you could expand on any changes or direction provided by your Board of Trustees to the organization in regards to the disability claims management process, if there have been any.
I think probably at every Board of Trustee meeting there are a variety of conversations that the board, would weigh in on and give influence to. And as we provide these reports, they ask us questions that, might change some of our processes slightly. I think that happens at every board meeting.
Sign of good governance. Have there been any specific directions from the board?
Not that I can point to in this regard, no.
Thank you. So circling back to where we began with the past 2 months, obviously having high numbers of claims, as well as some challenges around the staffing in your organization for the folks who work to move those claims along. Obviously, the longer individuals are off work, the harder it is for a return to work. An increase in disability claims kind of paired up with even a temporary decrease in that performance standard, recognizing the staffing challenges you've spoken to is not necessarily great. I have heard that you're hiring. I poked around on your website. I see there's some jobs posted closing in the next couple weeks. Have there been resources or direction provided by the board or senior management to help alleviate this in the short term?
We have always immediately asked the team to fill vacancies as they come up. We're actively working towards level loading those cases to ensure that folks have cases, and there's some balancing that needs to occur based on complexity of cases too, because not every case is the same. Some are more complex than others. So I think that making sure we have the right balance of staff to handle these claims is really driven by that metric that I started with, that true north, that turnaround time. Mm-hmm. And so if we're adjudicating these claims in time, then that says we're sufficiently resourced. And if we're not, then we either have some process challenges we need to improve on, or we have some staffing levels that we need to improve on as well. And so like I said, very pleased with our progress, because we were not meeting standard, as was pointed out. We got to within standard. It's now come a little bit out of standard, and we're going to work hard every day to get it back into that standard.
So the caseload levels then, just to be clear, are manageable for the staffing component once you fill those vacancies that have been identified?
We believe they are, but we're always looking to ensure they're balanced and low leveled.
Okay, and there's no intention or expectation at this point that you'd be looking to increase human resources in order to lower those caseload levels or expedite those processing times, get that standard back in order?
Given that we've had the positive results earlier in the year, we think that our staffing complement, when full, is appropriate.
Great. Thank you. Moving on, related to the employee benefits plan team, it's noted in 3S Health annual report that the EBP team implemented a new disability claims management system, claims healthcare information program. I don't know if you call it CHIPS. Okay,
Indeed, we
call it
do.
CHIPS. I'm always cautious of inventing or claiming acronyms in this committee. So with CHIPS, is this new software involved in tracking complaints from plan members? So hearing no, how is 3S Health then tracking those, kind of circling back to recommendation number 3 from the auditor?
So as the complaints come in, as per recommendation number 3, we manage that centrally, and then the team reviews it on a monthly basis for responses.
And that central management system, is that like something formal? Is that an Excel spreadsheet? I don't have any value judgments on that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's the latter.
Okay, thanks. So then can you maybe expand on what CHIPS is used for in terms of that disability management piece?
So CHIPS is really our system where when the claim comes in, it's the place where we house all of our claims and have all the information related to all of our disability claims. It is the primary system to manage claims.
Okay, great. Thanks. Who's the provider of that, and what was the cost of implementation?
Okay, so the vendor's name is Penad, P-E-N-A-D. And the payments would be in our payee disclosure that we do on our website and on our annual report. We'd have to follow up with the specific question, though, about the cost.
Great, yeah, if there's a total cost for the implementation of that program, as well as payments to the vendor specifically, that'd be appreciated.
Maybe just to jump in here again, there's been a few different moments where there's been an undertaking to provide information back. That's wonderful. That can come again through the clerk. Is it reasonable to have all the undertakings provided within the next month? Is that a reasonable period of time?
So far, yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Will.
Only have one more line of questions, so hopefully we stay within that. Moving on to the path to health. I believe in the auditor's report it was launched in 2019 with as a 3-year project, implementation in March 2022, if I'm right in that. Can you provide an update on the path to health and where it's at since this publication?
The Path Health was a very exciting initiative for us, and I can proudly say that we've concluded that as a program, but it's now into our daily operations. So the highlights were the implementation of the new disability system, which you pointed out earlier. We redesigned our case management processes. So the way I sometimes describe it is previously we were more like an organization that just, we adjudicated your claim, we took a look, you're either eligible or you weren't, and we decided to pay it or not. And then we handled, everything around that. Now we are more hands-on. We are making what we call care calls throughout the process. We're interacting with the claimant on a more regular basis, and we're helping them navigate their journey back to health. So it's a much more hands-on type of case management process. We simplified our forms and our booklets so that when people that were applying for disability, when they came onto our website or tried to understand the process, it was simpler and easier to follow for them. We increased our staffing complement to manage that higher touch case management. So we actually doubled our staffing complement of adjudicators during that time period to help reduce our caseloads. And then we also began to invest more significantly in treatment funding, so to assist our plan members in their recovery efforts. So those are the highlights of Path to Health, and I'm pleased to say we've embedded those changes into our daily operations as a result of that initiative.
Thanks so much. So can you speak to the experience of members through the disability claim lifecycle? Has it improved since this project?
I believe it has, yes, and we certainly do hear many stories from our claimants about their experience, and we actually use those to read out to staff to encourage them to continue along that journey. And well, as we say, take care of our caregivers is the tagline that we have.
Thanks. And it's noted in the auditor's report that some of the performance metrics do include those plan member satisfaction surveys. Those would align as well in terms of member satisfaction with the process?
Yes.
Great. Just one last question on this. Who's, you mentioned rehabilitation, return to work. Who's the rehabilitation service provider?
Largely CBI is our rehab service provider. And then we have another smaller relationship, but CBI is the primary provider.
Okay. Thank you. Kind of last area of questions from me as it relates to the various kind of like integrated business systems that you use at 3S Health. Is there a relationship, or will 3S Health have a relationship with the AIM system? Just AIMS, the S is for.
So AIMS is not a disability system. The CHIPS system will continue to be our disability system.
Right, and forgive me, I'm not our health critic, so I'm out of my depth here. All I can recall is it's 82 different business systems being integrated into AIMS, and so there's no impact on 3S Health. There's no relationship between any of your systems and AIMS.
No, the disability-related system is not one of those 82 systems being replaced.
Okay. So there wouldn't have been any disability claims impacted by AIMS at all, like, as you said, no relationship.
So not related to the disability system, no.
Okay. So not related to the disability system, what other systems, sorry, if this is obvious to everyone but me, would this have impacted?
So the AIM system is, a sector-wide platform, and it is, related to HR systems, scheduling systems, supply chain systems, financial reporting systems. So it is sector-wide, but the disability side of it is a separate system, as I mentioned. So I think that's the best way I could describe that.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, in trying to figure this out and looking at the readily publicly available information for AIMS and the business systems that it is replacing, you need a login. Yeah.
Deputy Chair, what's?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the member is a little bit outside the parameters of the audit report at this point.
Yeah, well, I think we're getting clarity. I think there's responses. We'll see. I mean, the scope of the committee is the work of the entity that's before us. So we'll see where what questions are being brought here. But and we'll listen to the response there as far as how it connected to the disability system. So.
Yeah, thanks. I was just flagging and trying to investigate this and going to see if there was any impact in delays for members or in with the AIMS rollout not being clear if it had impacted disability claimants. There's doesn't seem to be any ability to look at the list of the business systems being replaced online. You need my connection login to see that list. So that was kind of along the lines of my questions. It's unclear, I think, to see what, if any, systems the implementation of AIMS is going to replace at 3S Health.
I just, there is no impact on the disability claims as a result of AIMS. It's as I said, that system is separate and will continue on.
Thanks. No further questions.
Looking to, thanks for the work and responses, folks. Looking to committee members to see if there's any further questions with respect to the chapter and recommendations before us. No, not seeing any further. With respect to recommendations 1 and 2, I think we heard and have seen the path towards compliance and timelines and actions on that front. So I would welcome a motion to concur and note progress with recommendations 1 and 2. Do we have a mover? Moved by Mr. Gowdy. All agreed? That's carried. With respect to 3 and 4, we could note that implementation has occurred, and that I would welcome a motion to concur and note compliance. Moved by Ms. Lambert. All agreed? That's carried as well. Okay, that's those are the 4 new recommendations. At this point, I want to just say thank you very much to Deputy Minister Smith, to CEO Anderson over at 3S Health, and to all the folks that are with us today, and all those that are involved in the work that connects to the recommendations before us here today. So are there any final words, Deputy Minister Smith, on your behalf before we kick you out of here and bring in the SRC?
We will get out of here quickly. I do just want to say thank you for the questions and thank you for the opportunity to be here, and to the teams for their responses. Much appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone, and we'll have a very brief recess, and on deck next are Saskatchewan Research Council. Convene the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. I want to welcome the leadership from the Saskatchewan Research Council that have joined us here today. We're going to turn our attention to the chapters focused on the SRC. And I'd welcome Ryan Hill, Chief Operating Officer, to briefly introduce his official that's with him here today. Refrain from commenting on the chapters just now. I'll send it over to the auditor and then bring it back your way.
Beside me is Jocelyn Allard. She's the Associate Vice President of Finance.
Great, thank you very much. I'll turn it over now to the Provincial Auditor to make presentation, and we'll go from there.
So good morning. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Deputy Chair, committee members, and officials. With me today is Mr. Jason Shaw. He's the Deputy Provincial Auditor that is responsible for SRC. Jason will be making one presentation highlighting both chapters noted on the agenda together because they are both on the same topic. The first chapter does include 5 new recommendations for the committee's consideration. And I do want to thank SRC senior management and staff for the cooperation that was extended to us during the course of our work. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you. The Saskatchewan Research Council purchases various goods and services to deliver research and development services. Effective procurement processes are key to ensuring purchases are transparent, fair, and support the Council's achievement of best value. Not having effective procurement processes increases the risk of not using public resources wisely and placing the Council's reputation at risk. In 22-23, the Council incurred expenses of about $275 million. Chapter 10 in our 2020 report, Volume 1, starting on page 119, reports the results of our audit of the effectiveness of the Saskatchewan Research Council's processes to purchase goods and services. We concluded for the 12-month period ended November 30th, 2019, that Saskatchewan Research Council had, other than in the following areas, effective processes to purchase goods and services. We made 5 recommendations to the Council. Chapter 21 of our 2023 report, Volume 1, starting on page 203, reports the results of the Council's actions to implement these recommendations by December 2022. We found it implemented 1 recommendation, partially implemented 2, and made no progress on the last 2 recommendations. My presentation for each recommendation will summarize the new recommendations and then provide the status at December 2022. On page 124, we recommended the Saskatchewan Research Council establish expectations about when and how to communicate results of tenders for purchases with suppliers. The Council maintains a comprehensive set of written procurement-related policies and procedures. However, at November 2019, we found the Council did not provide staff with sufficient direction in 2 areas. The Council did not indicate how it expects staff to communicate the results of its evaluation of tenders to successful and unsuccessful suppliers. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement requires making its contract award notices public, such as posting notices on the Sask Tenders website. In addition, the Council did not expect staff to keep track or document the results of debriefs with unsuccessful suppliers. Not establishing expectations for communication with successful and unsuccessful suppliers responding to public tenders increases the risk of the Council not demonstrating to suppliers the fairness and transparency of its purchasing decisions. In addition, it risks violating requirements of external trade agreements. By December 2022, on page 204 of our follow-up chapter, we found the Council had improved its processes to communicate the results of public tenders. However, it had not updated its policies to align with these processes. We found the Council posted all 4 tenders we tested on the Sask Tenders website, including the results of winning bidders. Also, we found the Council appropriately sent letters of intent and regret to each successful and unsuccessful bidder for all 4 tenders tested. On page 125 of our 2020 report, Volume 1, we recommended the Saskatchewan Research Council establish guidance on setting the amount of time to allow suppliers to respond to tenders. The Council had not established a standard minimum amount of time to leave tenders open to allow suppliers sufficient time to respond to tenders. Good practice suggests 25 to 35 days and recognizes the time allowed may vary depending on the complexity and size of the purchase. Without a minimum sufficient time to respond, suppliers may choose not to respond to tenders or provide incomplete responses, resulting in fewer viable options. On page 205 of our 2023 report, volume 1, at December 2022, the council had not developed guidance or formal expectations to help staff establish how long to leave tenders open. On page 126 of our 2020 report, volume 1, we recommended the Saskatchewan Research Council monitor compliance with its policy for individual transaction limits when using purchasing cards. The council's purchasing card policy and purchasing card procedures give staff clear and complete guidance on their use, including setting individual monthly transaction limits. For one of 17 purchase card transactions we tested, an employee did not follow the council's policies by splitting a purchase transaction exceeding $5,000 into 2 separate payments. The employee's single transaction dollar limit was $5,000. The employee did not have approval to exceed their single transaction limit. There was no evidence the supervisor responsible for reviewing and approving the employee's monthly statement noticed the split transaction. Adhering to purchasing card policies and procedures reduces the risk employees make inappropriate purchases on purchasing cards. Appropriately monitoring purchasing cards allows management to confirm purchases are appropriate and align with council policy. On page 206 of our follow-up chapter, by December 2022, we concluded the council implemented this recommendation. We found it followed its policy for purchasing card transaction limits for the transactions we tested. On page 127 of our 2020 report, volume 1, we recommended the Saskatchewan Research Council monitor the continued appropriateness of individual transaction limits on purchase cards when approving temporary changes to dollar value limits for special circumstances. We found the council did not reduce individual transaction purchase card limits after granting temporary increases for a single purchase due to special circumstances for 2 of 17 items we tested. For example, an employee had an individual transaction limit of $10,000 for 2 months after the temporary increase from $5,000. Not actively monitoring and timely returning temporary transaction limits increases the risk of employees making inappropriate purchases or purchases not in accordance with the council's expectations. On page 206 of our 2023 follow-up report, by December 2022, we found the council improved its processes to monitor purchasing card transaction limits by periodically reviewing transaction limits. However, further work was required. We tested 8 purchase card transactions up to December 2022, where staff required a temporary transaction limit increase. We found 3 transactions where the council did not reduce limits to previous limits within 60 days. Also, we found 1 transaction where staff did not obtain all appropriate approvals before temporarily increasing the transaction limit to make the purchase. On page 133 of our 2020 report, volume 1, we recommended the Saskatchewan Research Council establish a formal process to assess and track supplier performance. The council took an informal approach where staff verbally discuss issues as they arise with suppliers and address performance issues as they occur. The council did not formally assess whether suppliers performed to a satisfactory level after the conclusion of the contract or after its receipt of its goods and services. Good practice suggests use of formal processes to assess supplier performance. This allows for appropriate consideration of supplier performance when making future purchasing decisions, which decreases the risk of the council using unqualified or inappropriate suppliers. On page 207 of our follow-up chapter, by December 2022, we found the council did not change its process and did not formally assess the results of supplier performance. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to thank as well SRC for the status update on this front and the follow-up by the Auditor's Office. I'll table at this point PAC 11429 Saskatchewan Research Council status update dated December 14th, 2023. And I'll turn it over to Chief Operating Officer Mr. Hill for a brief comment and with respect to the recommendations or the chapters, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yep. Thank you very much. We agree with all the comments and all the findings within the auditor's report, and subsequent to the most recent follow-up audit, we have fully implemented all recommendations. Within all of these situations, we did perform these as identified informally. However, when they're not appropriately documented, not appropriately followed, it does make it difficult for the purposes of determining it during an audit.
Thank you for the words. Thanks for the work on this front. We'll open it up to members for questions. Ms. Young?
Thanks so much, and thanks for being here today. It's been really exciting to watch the expansion of SRC. I understand you're the second largest research and technology organization in Canada these days, which is a remarkable accomplishment for the province, and I think also speaks to the importance of this audit and looking at the tendering that you do for goods and services, having expanded from I think it's 72 million in 18-19 up to $275 million a year, I believe was the number cited by the auditor's office most recently. So yeah, just wow, and thanks for that. I think it really underscores the importance of as you said, these proper documentation of all of these policies as it pertains to procurement and purchasing and all of that. So where do I want to begin? So many questions. Love SRC. Maybe starting on P cards, has SRC been monitoring compliance with the split authorities between what is purchased on P cards and what is tendered through your purchasing group to ensure that that $5,000 limit is adhered to?
Yes, we have been.
And there's no incidents of that not being adhered to?
No.
Great. Thank you. One of the audit goals was to assess SRC's approach to accessing feasible sources of supply for purchases that you make. And so looking for real-world examples, perhaps one of the most prominent ones, can you advise what you've done in relation to the source of ore supply for the new critical minerals processing facility?
With regards to the critical minerals facility, we are in discussions with a number of entities surrounding to the securement of supply. We do have supply already secured for a year's worth of operation.
Okay, great. So was the first ingot poured in 2021? Am I right in remembering that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so when that first occurred, where did you purchase the raw ore from, and what are the sources of supply going to be then for this test facility?
The initial ore secured was from Brazil, from the state-owned company in Brazil for the nuclear entity, INB. As far as the oxides that were used to create the first metal ingots, they were secured, I believe, from Europe, those oxides. Going forward, of course, with regards to supply, we are talking to a number of entities within the United States, Australia, Vietnam, with regards to securing supply.
Thanks. And in terms of Europe, do you have the specific countries from which?
I apologize, I can't recall where we purchased those oxides from. They were a very small amount because we were using it to be able to take and prove out the actual technical viability, being able to create the metal alloys.
Right, that's okay. If you have that information available and it could be provided to the committee at a later date, that would be appreciated.
Just to follow up, to confirm for the processor on the table, is that something you're able to undertake and bring supply back to this committee?
Yep.
At a later date?
Yep.
Is a month's time reasonable as
Absolutely.
As a due date there? And that can be sent through the clerk here.
Thanks so much. And then on a go-forward basis, I believe you mentioned the United States, Australia, and Vietnam. Those are the three countries that SRC is looking at for sourcing this from?
We're looking at all available areas, but those are the ones that we've had some advanced conversations with regards to.
Okay. What are the, knowing little about this, what are the other countries that play in that field that you'd be? pursuing?
With regards to monazite is actually fairly broadly available and is available in a number of areas. The whole consideration of rare earth elements being rare, it's a bit of a misnomer with regards to the name. They're not actually that rare. It's
Great
basically, they're rather common. It's more the ability within the appropriate concentration to be able to get them. And what we're looking for is basically companies that are in areas whereby we have a good relationship, we're willing to work with them, and more than anything, we have security of supply.
Thanks. So on that security of supply, given the policy framework for purchasing that's outlined in the 2020 audit, the use of sole sourcing requires like very specific management overrides, as it should.
Yep.
So can you advise how many sole contracts above 25,000 have been awarded in the past, I don't know, 3 years?
Don't have that information available, but it is information that we can take and pull.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd be really interested in 2020, 2021, 21, 22, and then 22, 23 if it's available. As well as, of course, like what those contracts were for and what amount those contracts were for as well.
Just to similar intervention here, just to make sure we have a good record of things. That's information that you're able to undertake and supply back to the committee in months' time as well? Is
Yes.
that reasonable? Thank you very much.
So maybe tying those two together, the processing equipment that goes into that critical minerals facility, it must be like not anything close to approaching an expert, but must be fairly unique given this type of processing facility is found in very few countries.
The equipment itself is actually, the most unique portion is the solvent extraction, which is one of the main value-added considerations, and it's what we are actually building ourselves.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that was going to be my follow-up question is, you know, from a cost perspective of the actual equipment, how much of it is being sole sourced or has been sole sourced? And
Once again, don't have that information available on hand with regards to direct award versus RFP, but it is something that, once again, we can obtain.
thank you. I appreciate that, as well as, you know, any of those specifics around if there's information or, equipment that's being developed in-house versus, you know, where other equipment may be originating from.
Yeah.
I appreciate that undertaking. Looking at the progress, the good progress that has been made on the auditor's recommendations and hearing your opening comments that many of these existed in practice but perhaps weren't documented or necessarily always adhered to. The auditor's first report was in 2020, I believe, and then the second in 2023. And by 2020, only one of five was formally implemented. And now looking through, obviously, there's 5 out of 5. Can we just go through them and can you clarify when these were formally implemented between, I guess, 2020 and now?
I'll pass that over to Jocelyn.
Thank you.
So on the first recommendation on establishing when and how to communicate the results of the tenders, those purchasing SOPs that we follow were formally updated in the summer of 2023. So they have been updated to reflect our guidance effectively as of September 2023, our original appearance date. In terms of, again, allowing or establishing the guidance on the amount of time to allow suppliers to respond, that update, again, the same purchasing set of procedures or SOPs, so as of September 2023. The monitoring of individual transaction limits for purchasing cards, that, again, we were doing throughout this whole phase. We had implemented this back shortly after the auditor's report and have formally documented that on a monthly basis now. So there's evidence of that control being implemented. the formal process on assessing and tracking supplier performance. That process has been implemented through key surveys of project leaders, and those surveys started in our second quarter this year. So we are trying to do that on a quarterly basis where we ask for any feedback, or in one-off situations where there may be, you know, considerations where we'd like to document on a more regular basis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a couple questions, and then when I have maybe one higher level question. You might be out of here early. On the second recommendation, that SRC established guidance on setting the amount of time to allow suppliers to respond to tenders, recognizing that tenders can be unique. Sometimes there may be readily available off-the-shelf solutions. Sometimes it may be very, very specific. Have there been any instances in which purchasing was sole sourced due to an abbreviated timeline?
Very few situations whereby purchasing has been sole sourced due to abbreviated timeline. Generally, if anything is associated with that, it's actually work whereby we are doing work for a client, and the client's timelines and therefore the client's direction as to who we should be purchasing from is built within that. We don't generally make considerations with regards to short timelines for the purposes of direct award.
So forgive me, the clients that you're working with can direct purchasing.
The clients that we're working with, if we were taking and actually delivering them a product, they can direct purchasing with regards to the product that we're delivering them.
Interesting. Okay. So how do you, recognizing like SRC has an incredibly impressive group of people working for it, and, you know, board members with extensive expertise specifically within the private sector. Given that new, and my understanding is like many of them continue to work in the private sector, which I think speaks again to the quality of board members that you have. How do you ensure then that there are no conflicts of interest?
We have a very stringent requirements with regards to conflict of interest. So going all the way from the board of directors level, all the way down to the employee levels, there's annual reporting with regards to potential conflicts of interest, annual sign off of potential conflict of interests within the board meetings. One of the very first things we open up with is a declaration of conflict of interest. And then with regards to any new suppliers or any new clients on the other side of it, we actually perform a detailed review of the entities going back to beneficial ownership.
Okay, so then in the purchasing processes regarding the companies that you purchase products and services from, and the companies, are there instances in which companies may be owned or operated by board members?
No.
Okay.
No, in any situation whereby there might be something such as that, it would be absolutely identified. It would be taken and escalated for review. And if it was something that would ever be escalated to the board in a situation whereby there's a board vote, of course, the board member would take and recuse themselves from anything associated with that. But it's not something that we've had happen.
Right, okay, interesting. Do you think, would it be possible to table any guidelines that you have for, or like send to the committee any guidelines that you do have for staff or board members as it relates to that?
To conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. On one specific question on the third recommendation, that SRC monitor the continued appropriateness of individual transaction limits on P cards when approving temporary changes to the dollar value limits for special circumstances. It was noted in your comments as well as in this that it is reviewed and followed up on a regular basis. Can you just be a little bit more specific? Like, what's a regular basis, and who's ultimately accountable for that?
Right. So on our typical process on purchasing cards, so if an employee requires an invoice to be processed in excess of their $5,000 transaction limit, an email is sent typically with support for the transaction to their manager as well as to a finance person. and both those individuals are required to approve the extension of the limit for that transaction to be processed. Once the transaction is processed, we ask the vendors to notify that the transaction has been posted to the credit card if it or ask the employees to monitor. The employees then notify our purchasing card group, and that limit is reduced down on a frequent basis, which I would say typically monthly, if not, or quarterly, if not monthly. We go back through the list of extended limits on our online banking system. We can see which employees have extended limits at that point above the $5,000. At that point, if we're not certain that the extension is still required, we ask the employee or the limit is reduced back down. So quarterly, if not monthly, we are documenting that and have emails and such.
Thank you so much. And then just on the last recommendation that SRC establish a formal process to assess and track supplier performance. It's indicated in your comments and in the update that purchasing team has email surveys of project leads related to supplier performance. Do you know what's the response rate of those surveys, or is it obligatory?
Right now, we are making obligatory, yes.
And is that documentation, how is that maintained? Is there like a central location for it? How is it shared with team members?
So our purchasing team has a SharePoint site that they retain all the responses on.
Okay, great, thank you. And it's mentioned in the auditor's report that your procurement team, your senior leadership works closely with the Provincial Corporate Procurement Committee. Is that information that's shared at that level as well?
Yes, within the meetings that they take, and they share best practices with regards to all procurement.
Okay, great. And the same would be true for, experiences with suppliers and...
Yes, absolutely. And going beyond that, we've actually shared our templates with regards to a number of situations with other entities to be able to use as a basis for the creation of their own.
Wow. Excellent. Not reinventing the wheel every time. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Further questions from other committee members? I see Deputy Chair Nerleen.
I just have a comment, and I too want to congratulate you on the outstanding growth at SRC and the quality of work that you're doing. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No. Thank you for the work on these recommendations. The time here today, we have 4 new recommendations before us, and I believe the actions that have been taken will have implemented the 4 recommendations. So I would look for a motion that concurs and notes compliance with respect to recommendations 1 through 4. Do I have a mover? Moved by Mr. Fayaz. All agreed? All right, that's carried. This time, Mr. Hill and Ms. Allard, thank you very much for your time here today. Best to all those that were involved in this work as well, and thanks to them as well. Do you have a final word before you depart here today?
No final word. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We should deal with the 5th recommendation as well. We bring you back this afternoon. It's good to make sure that the auditors alert in these meetings here. So that was our little test there, and she certainly was. And so with respect to the 5th recommendation, that too has been acted on and has been implemented. So we would note, I would welcome a motion to note compliance, that we concur and note compliance, moved by Mr. Gowdy. And all agreed? All right, that's carried. Going back to those other parts, thanks so much for all the work on these fronts, and to your teams, thanks for your presence here today. And as a committee now, we'll take a brief recess for lunch, and we'll be back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
you.